Well, how are you? Still thinking of builders. All right. Online. Should be good. This is, we're set up as a meeting, so if people can keep themselves muted if you're online, that'd be great. Great. Hi. So, I'm calling the, let's see, this is, what day is it today? August 19th, yes. Meeting of the Scio Township Jackson Road Overlay District Advisory Committee, order. And, I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and I think everybody's here who's coming. We do have a few people online. And so the first thing is adoption of the agenda. I just want to add introductions to the agenda. It's online.
Yeah, it's online.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the agenda, it's adoption of the agenda, approval of minutes, public comment. Sort of about what we're going to discuss today. And then is this the next meeting, and then public comment and adjournment. So that's our, for those that don't have access to the agenda.
I move adoption of the agenda.
Thank you. Okay, moved by Kim and seconded by Brian. All those in favor who are voting members of the JRAG, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're moving ahead with the posted agenda. The minutes, we really didn't take minutes, although the memo and the handout was a summary of where the committee is. So maybe would that be us, and the reporting, would that be a suitable documentation of?
So,
Yeah.
we did not have minutes at our July meeting.
No.
They were supposed to be forthcoming in those minutes from the last meeting. So we have two, we have second meeting without minutes. So we kind of
Say,
remind you that. So I didn't receive minutes as part of the packet, so I presume that's forthcoming.
it's only the actual documentation of, as opposed to the minutes. We haven't really taken any action except for, moving. And this is sort of the documentation of the committee. And I know. Yeah.
March 20th.
And unless there's somebody who wants to volunteer to take them, that's the only other way we can do it. Yeah. So we don't have minutes.
Excuse me, can someone let Kathy Knoll into the meeting,
Oh,
please?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for noticing.
Probably got a text.
What?
Probably got a text.
No, they can unmute themselves. So it's just a meeting. Okay, so with that, I'll move to public comment. Anyone else? If anyone, well, let's do introductions first, and we can introduce the people that are online too. So, just,
Start with me.
yes, please.
Bob Hyde, I'm on the planning commission.
Judy Monk. Incumbent candidate.
Primary winner.
Soon to be BOT.
Yeah.
John Reiser, I'm on the BOT and I'm also on the planning commission.
Kim Moore, Planning Commission.
Jillian Carey, trustee and chair of Road Advisory Committee.
Jan Culbertson, Planning Commission Chair.
Ryan Yapel, DDA member and planning commissioner.
Jay Holland, DEA.
I'm Barbara Collegia, I'm the deputy clerk.
Hi, Barbara.
Hey, Barbara, you're over there.
Please.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, and we'll move online. Kathy.
Kathy Knowles, Scio trustee.
Kathleen.
Hello, Kathleen Brandt. I'm a primary winner. Normally I would be in person, but I caught COVID last week and I'm still testing positive.
Oh, all right.
Hope you get better.
Get better.
Yeah.
It's quite all right.
All right. And then, we have, Pam. Boyd.
Yes. Pam Boyd, a resident.
Okay. Rob. Sorry, there's Rob Pattinson and Bob Walsh.
Bob Walsh, Planning Commission.
Thanks, Bob. And Rob Pattinson. Okay, Doug.
Doug Lewan, one of the township planning consultants.
And Laura.
Laura Crops, the other planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates.
Thank you, great. All right, with that, then I'll return it to our public. Is there any public comment before we begin the agenda items? Okay, hearing none. Oh, there's Rob. Yes, Rob.
I didn't speak up because I'm not on any planning commissions or committees or anything else. So this is all you guys here officially.
Thank you.
So there's no public comment?
No public comment.
Move to close public comment?
Okay. And support, okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, public comment is closed at 4:38. Then I just wanted to thank people, from Planning Commission and those who won their primary. So welcome. And this is an advisory group that the Planning Commission. It was the result of a joint meeting between the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission to take a look at the Jackson Road corridor. And because the Planning Commission had been talking a little bit about looking at some form-based zoning, which Doug can describe a little bit more, some changes in the zoning based on some of the things that were new in our master plan document. And it made sense to, because all of the planning commission is just a recommending body. And so any changes in zoning and so forth would have to go, through a public hearing process and the Board of Trustees. So it made sense to kind of have a discussion, first of all, about people's thinking around Jackson Road corridor, what's working, what's not working, et cetera. And so the thought was then it would be good to get, because so much of the Jackson Road corridor is within the DDA, that it made sense to have a committee made up of trustees, DDA members and planning commission members to kind of work with the planning consultants a little deeper and make some recommendations to the planning commission. So that's sort of where we are. And the thought was, since we're at a point where there are going to be some new people joining the trustees, that before this got handed over to the Planning Commission, that we wanted to kind of get this group back together again and sort of go over where we're at and see if there are any real objections or other brilliant ideas that we haven't thought of, concerns, et cetera, before the committee kind of wrapped up. So that's the purpose of bringing everybody together. So with that introduction, I'll kind of turn it over to Doug, and Doug has been the planning consultant that's sort of been leading us through this process. And the memo that was included in the agenda packet is kind of and the backup documentation is sort of the summary of where the committee is at this point. Okay, thanks, Doug.
Yeah, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can everybody see me? Is that my?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My little camera light isn't on for some reason.
Well, you're looking
Um,
quite handsome without lighting.
Well, thank you, thank you. That makes my day.
Is he?
So
Yeah,
a little background to some of the,
yeah, on the screen.
I say some of the new folks, but I know you're not new. This group was put together by the Planning Commission, I believe in October or so of last year. And as Jan said, it was supposed to provide some direction so that, you know, the information that would come out of this group could hopefully be representative of the board and the Planning Commission and hopefully the DDA as well. And then hand off, you know, those kind of thoughts and ideas to the Planning Commission, and then the Planning Commission would begin drafting an amendment to what's now known as the Jackson Road Overlay District, but that, you know, that could change. It could become something completely new. And so that's what we've been doing. What the initial plan was to have 3 meetings with this group. And after the third meeting, have enough information to be able to at least give the Planning Commission some parameters to work under, some kind of maybe goals and strategies that the Planning Commission could use to begin their work in updating the zoning ordinance, the Jackson Road Overlay District. So that's where we're at. And then, as Jan mentioned at the last meeting, which was our third meeting, it was mentioned, I believe, by Ryan, brought it up that you know, there very well could be a new township board or part of a new township board that should probably be included or in you know, some of these discussions to make sure we're on the right path. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Ryan, but I think that was the general gist of the discussion last time. So here we are. The primary is over. We do have some new folks, and we want to make sure that the information that we turn over to the Planning Commission reflects some of the new folks. And again, I don't mean to say new because most of you have been involved in one way or another with the township for quite some time. But to kind of give a little summary, and I won't spend too much time, but a little summary of the meetings to date for maybe some of you who weren't watching or being part of the previous groups, is the 3 meetings to date. The first was a lot of background information. All this information is still contained online in the agendas of the previous meetings that the Jackson Road Advisory Group has had. Meeting 1 was a pretty big data dump on you know, master plan, zoning ordinance, goals and policies, some maps, sewer service maps, future land use map, things like that. So a lot of background information. I thought some good information to kind of give everyone a general concept of kind of where we're at right now. The second meeting, we talked about residential densities, particularly multifamily residential densities, and what that means in Scio Township right now. Comparing what's in the zoning ordinance now, which some people might not define as high density residential. There's our 2 residential zoning districts, or multiple family residential zoning districts are I believe 8 units per acre and 10 units per acre. It might be 6, 8, and 10 actually. And you know, that compared to some density that we've approved recently, which the Crossroads project hasn't been fully approved, but preliminarily approved. And then the agreement that we had with the former Goodrich theater site, both had substantially higher densities than what the current zoning ordinance would permit. So I think we talked a little bit about that. I can get you specifics on those numbers if we get into a discussion on that. But you know, are we looking for densities if we you know, if the group and if ultimately the planning commission and township board want to promote higher density residential within the corridor, are we looking more at the zoning density? Or are we looking more at, you know, two current projects that have come before us? And it's my impression that we were looking at more towards the higher densities than what's in the current zoning ordinance. That opens up some discussion about how we get there, how do we get to those densities? And so we talked a lot about, do we just allow, you know, permitted by right within the Jackson Road corridor, some of these higher densities for residential? Or do we allow it as part of the planned unit development? The difference would be if we allowed it as right. Say if we rewrote the Jackson Road overlay district and allowed higher densities as a matter of right, that would, as long as the developer met the minimum standards, the township doesn't have a lot of discretion on the project. They're compelled to approve a project if it meets all the minimum standards. If on the other hand, we were to maintain as a planned unit development, as it is now, actually, the township planning commission and township board have a substantial amount of discretion in approving higher density developments, kind of like we did with the dealerships a little further west on the corridor. Those were done as a PUD, and the township had a fair amount of discretion in those approvals. So it was my impression that the group was trending more towards leaving it as a PUD, or somehow allowing some more discretion rather than just uses permitted by right with that higher density residential. But you can all jump in a minute when I'm done here and let me know if I have that right. The third item, and we talked a little bit about form-based codes at the second meeting as well. And in a nutshell, form-based code is a mixed use district that allows a lot more uses, and is more interested in how the end product looks, as far as like building architecture, location of buildings, location of parking, location of access, as opposed to this lot has to be commercial and this lot has to be office and this lot has to be residential, which is kind of conventional zoning. Form-based code is more mixed use district, and I think we also pointed out that the Jackson Road overlay district is based on form-based code ideas. So form-based code is not new; it's been around a while. And when we redid the Jackson Road overlay district initially a number of years ago, we used some of those concepts. Distance from roads, you know, we have a maximum distance for buildings from road, not a minimum distance. We promote parking in the side and rear in the Jackson Road overlay district, with only a certain percentage being permitted in the front of the building and a certain amount being promoted in the front of the building. Those are all kind of form-based code ideas. The meeting we had a couple weeks ago, maybe it's 3 weeks ago now, I went over an exercise that I think is really helpful, and I kind of titled it, what does, and so, and then we went on in the report and said, what does the data say? And then we said, what does the master plan say? What does the SWOT exercise say? What does the advisory group say? And then we came up with, I came up with, based on that information, I came up with 6 strategy recommendations that ultimately would have gone to the planning commission for their consideration. And those were strategy ideas that I believed were that came out of the 3 previous meetings and some of the information that we discussed. And we were moving towards trying to develop some consensus at that meeting through perhaps a voting exercise. We never got to that point. It was discussed that, because of the election coming up, we might want to hold on that. And so that's kind of where we're at. I'm not sure we actually need a voting exercise, to be honest, at this point, particularly with some of the new folks, it might be unfair to ask you to vote on something that you're just seeing maybe for the first time today. So we're gonna postpone that idea. If we do have a meeting for, we can get back to that. Or we could kind of just go to the strategies. So that's where we're at. I mean, I could share I tell you what, why don't I stop there for a second and turn it back over to you, Jan, and if there's something you would like to add, or maybe some other of the folks that have been part of the group for since the start would like to add, maybe that I missed, we can, why don't we stop here for a second?
And just for reference, if you go to the memo that Doug posted, the 6 kind of strategy options, if you will, are listed on page 2 of that memo. So that's good to, I mean, from a basis of discussion, that's really kind of the core issues that we were discussing.
I do have something to kind of
Yeah,
clarify. So when we were here, referencing your last memo at our last meeting, and I kind of questioned something in the, what does the master plan say? And you, in bullet 4, you indicated that the sub-Jackson Road area indicates multifamily residential is acceptable if sewer capacity, and if developed as part of the PUD. And I think you're saying that the master plan says that. And I don't know, where does it say that in the master plan?
Oh, okay, now I recall. I know you.
Yeah, when I sent you that, I couldn't remember the whole, I apologize when I sent you that
Yeah.
email earlier. I didn't.
Yeah. I will look that up while the discussion ensues, and I'll try to find that.
Okay.
But yeah.
And you kind of reference it in your current memo.
Yeah.
Kim, I think I know where that is.
In page 2 at the top. Do you do? Number 2, you say higher density residential developments, a PUD must be applied for. Where does it say you have to apply for a PUD for residential?
That what they're asking us to.
That's a recommendation, isn't it?
and I think one, because it
No,
isn't.
that's direction of the planning.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is it isn't multifamily zoning. If you look at where multifamily zoning is, it does not exist in the Jackson Road corridor. So but it's allowed as a part of a PUD, coming in as a PUD,
Because it doesn't exist doesn't mean that it's
a separate
excluded.
zoning.
Yeah.
You have to then rely on the master plan, and then the master plan says it can be as a part of the, as a PUD. So when you come in with a PUD, that's when you can say it's either meets existing zoning or
Comes in as a PUD.
it's part of.
And where is
it's
that?
planned for in the master plan.
That's what you said you knew where it was.
Yeah.
Well, it's on page 66, future use, land use plan for the Jackson Road sub-area, item 7. It says, as part of that, the sub-area may consider multifamily residential when reviewed as part of an overall PUD proposal. So
Okay.
that's where it is in the master.
Thank you.
So that's why right now, technically, you can't come in with a multifamily unless it's part of a PUD.
Which is a
Because it's
rezone,
not. So, right, because it's not, or a rezoning,
Yeah.
Well, the whole PUD.
or what?
In some cases, it's like the whole PUD.
There was
It's
another,
supposed to be mixed use.
Yeah, but I think in the master plan, we updated it, so it's, and we'd have to go back, it doesn't have to be part of a mixed use anymore, according to the master plan.
There's Woodview at 540 units.
They have,
They have-
they have
They have a
the
medical office
commercial in
building.
front.
Right. Put a couple of postage stamps on the other one.
Yep,
So with this district, are we trying to make or create within the district its own zoning, or are we still going to, but it says here in the master plan that we can do this. Should it be just part of that zone? And that's what we're working.
And that's where, and I think this is where some of the issues have come up in planning. And just a couple of them that kind of said, we still allow, you know, the discussions have been about, storage facilities. There are conditional use, car dealerships. Then the housing on the other side, right, of more positive use, right, of the corridor. And then we've had, for instance, in certain zoning districts, you can only have 10% retail. And in other,
I too.
you can only have 10%
Not in
and,
Scio. You're talking about other.
no, in Scio.
won.
I1, and then sometimes it's a conditional use too. And so part of this is, do we need to have all this individual zoning, or does it make sense to have a form-based zoning where you say, you know, you don't want parking, you know, up on Jackson Road, you want your buildings there, you want your parking behind, does it matter? Then in form-based zoning, if you did a more formal form-based zoning, it would be, these are the uses that are permitted in this district. And it doesn't matter if it's, you know, there'd be, you know, a description of some things that might be industrial, but they wouldn't, you know, it probably wouldn't be like car repair or something like that. You know, at properties that have frontage on Jackson Road, say, for instance. So part of the question is, do we try and simplify the zoning so it isn't so much cut and paste, but there's more flexibility as long as you conform to certain, you know, form requirements. Right now, and Doug, just jump in if I say anything
And that's what, I
incorrect.
just want to say this, because
Yeah.
I hear people refer to this group as the Jackson Road Overlay District Group. And that's why we're dealing with the Jackson Road overlay. That's already a overlay zoning for Jackson Road.
That's part
That's
of
already
the
in
zoning.
existence. And the question is, if we go to this form-based, how do we amend the Jackson Road overlay district? So that's one question. And then to be more pedestrian friendly, like Jan was just saying, with parking in the back, buildings closer to the sidewalk. That's just one idea. And then, but we can already have residential on Jackson Road. That's another idea, is how do we want Jackson Road to look? We want to put in more crosswalks so people don't kill themselves trying to get on the other side to one of our restaurants. And then another idea that we're looking for input from is in our changing Jackson Road. We've talked about creating these nodes, these little areas along Jackson Road that we would try to put in more residential, more cafes, that kind of thing.
Retail kind of.
Yeah, try to encourage that kind of thing. So, so those are kind of three different areas of thought. Do we need to change the Jackson Road overlay district? How do we make Jackson Road more pedestrian friendly? Do we want to go to this form, have a mixture of what we have already in the Jackson Road overlay as well as some form zoning? How do we want to make it more pedestrian friendly? And then secondarily, how do we incorporate residential in the mix?
And I think part of why the node kind of concept, and Doug can get into this too, is, you know, the Jackson Road corridor is very long. And so you sort of can't, if you end up with a sprinkle of residential here, a sprinkle of residential here, you know, it's really hard to connect that, especially from a pedestrian orientation. But if you can create those nodes and actually focus that development on those.
Like on Zebra Road.
What's that?
Like on Zebra Road, the Grimmett had put it on Zebra Road, yeah, by Park Road.
Yeah, by Park. Yep, exactly. Then you start creating that sense of, you know, there's more walkability, there's more connectivity, et cetera. Go ahead.
So how big are these nodes that you're envisioning? Does it take into account the whole north-south of Zebra Road intersection, for instance? I mean, is it, you've got drawn as circles on the map that was provided.
And I think that would go back to the planning commission to be more detailed
Okay.
in, you know.
That's flexible.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
But that would be the concept, is you'd want this, you know, if you can walk someplace in 10 or 15 minutes, it's considered walkable. But, you know, it isn't 10 or 15 minutes between Wagner and Baker, yeah.
And I would say, if I could just throw
Yeah.
this in here, some of the Jackson Road thinking is we have these huge islands. In the middle. We can create bike lanes and have them, you know, separated off. That's how much space we have in Jackson. And and the last thing I would say, everything doesn't have to happen all at once. It can be 4 or 5 year plan or 10-year plan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jake, go ahead.
I just, well, I think bike lanes in the median's a terrible idea. Because there's all the crossovers that they would have to have a traffic signal at or whatever, some kind of a crossway and people turning and other people going straight. I think it could be a health disaster. Just to go up on that a little bit. You talk about nodes, when we talk about the idea of PUD, which is a mixed use, isn't that a node?
Mhm.
So by having a PUD, we have a node. And I'm gonna beat this drum one more time, is my biggest concern being DDA is our sewer capacity. And the fact that we have informally, by taxation, promised sewer capacity to many, many commercial properties. And if we convert those to residential, which takes a much higher number, my understanding of residential REUs, that the township could get into some legal logistics as to, you know, if I own a commercial piece of property, zone commercial, and I've been taxed on it as if it was gonna have sewer service for 25 years. And then all of a sudden I bring in a plan and say, I'm sorry, we don't have any sewer service left. I'm coming after the township, you know, and probably gonna take it a long ways to do it because it just doesn't seem right.
You're saying we shouldn't take away what we've already given them.
If you promote without getting a bigger sewer contract, I'm saying that you may end up taking away sewer service that has been informally by taxation promised to property owners in Scio Township. You know, in the I went ahead and looked up the elements of a form-based code is defined by the Form-Based Code Institute. And it's a regulating plan, which JROD is. It has public standards, which realm of sidewalk travel, lanes of street parking, etc. JROD does. The building standards regulating, controlling and features, configurations and functions, JROD has. After that, it's administration, which, gee, do we need more administration? You know, I mean, it's just one more thing that we, as a township, would have to pay for. And then there's the glossary, and it goes, additional options are architectural standards, which JROD has. Landscaping standards, which JROD has. Environmental resource standards, regulating, controlling issues such as stormwater drainage, infiltration, development on slopes and tree protection, JROD provides for, as does our master plan and zoning. Landscaping standards provided by JROD, and signage standard provided in our planning code. So I'm a little.
The difference is, and you're right, the difference is the more pedestrian friendly with buildings being closer. And I know you've mentioned you don't like that. You like.
Well, I've been a
You like the
DDA.
parking, hold on, you like the parking in the front and the building in the back. But I would just stop by saying, we don't have to get rid of J-Rod.
I'm not
We
saying
can just amend it and pick some of the things we like, or maybe we don't. Maybe
I
we say we don't
understand.
even want the form
See, I
back.
understand that parking, you know, parking in the back, building in the front. I kind of understand that, but you know, as you go down the corridor, you're gonna have the existings with the parking in the front and then a building forward, and then back again and forward and back again. You know, I'm wondering how that's gonna appear. Of course, over time, the ones with the parking in the front will be torn down and then they'll fall into the new code. You have to start somewhere. I mean, I understand that, but the idea of being on DDA for over 20 years, and we've talked about and tried to deal with the walkability. In fact, there was a proposal for a downtown, you know, where Menards is now, that after several years was tanked. But it had, you know, it was a lifestyle center. And I think financially it just didn't make sense. It was kicked around at the trustee level for probably 2 years, 3 years. I don't know. It was kicked back and forth for a long time. Kathleen Noel probably remembers that. I think she was there then. And I just have concerns about more regulation, more restrictions, more administration. However, I mean, we do have to move forward as far as, you know, as far as being somewhat more progressive as far as what we're doing. But I'm really concerned, it all comes back to me to the walkability is probably not gonna go away. There may be some MDOT restrictions as far as how many traffic lights you can put in. I've been told that before. As far as crosswalks, you know, what if you wanted to have a crosswalk, you know, every 100 yards? I mean, why do we even have a boulevard then? It's for moving traffic. And it's kind of regulated it's somewhat regulated by the state and the county. But I agree, there's an issue. I mean, you used to talk about tunnels and bridges, and, you know, then it's like you got security issues, you've got maintenance issues, you've got the cost issues, you've got all those things that come up. So, I mean, the node concept, but doing it through a PUD is a node. And, you know, even though I've been a developer and I've been on the, on the board of the National Association of Home Builders and things like that, we try to work through those things. I'm just concerned with, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Having been on planning commission sat on planning commission for 13 years, what I liked about PUDs, even though as a developer, I don't like PUDs, is there is some control as long as the people who are on the planning commission are reasonable and don't try to overregulate and tell developers how to design the building, because they will walk, because if they can't make a profit building in Scio Township, they're out of here. So, that's all I got to
So
say.
you would recommend we not do anything?
I think it can
When
be
it comes
tweaked.
down to
No,
what
I
you
don't
would,
necessarily believe that, but I'm
what you
just,
would recommend to the planning commission?
I know that there's gonna be some recommendations, and that's what you're talking about. And, you know,
Well, I mean, what your thinking is,
what my thinking is,
and if you don't want to say that right now,
the
it's-
PUD, you know, I think the control, the planning commission, the trustees already have a lot of control over, you know, via PUDs with this mixed use thing. And I love straight zoning, but having sat on planning commission, I saw with straight zoning, I've seen it be horrible. Because it was like, here's my plan, and we had to approve it, you know, or go to court. And there was one or two in particular where we had to approve it. And they had a conditional use or whatever, and it really hurt me to see those projects just get to walk through, even though they were bad plans.
when
So
you say straight use, you mean?
By right.
by
By
right, yeah. So, you know, when we start talking about changing to go back to by right, you know, an R2 by right or an R3, whatever, by right, it's kind of scares the heck out of me, that, and then we get back to the sewer issue.
I think we have a couple
So,
people
sorry,
that have
I've
wanted to,
talked too long, so
but
Yeah.
well.
thanks for listening.
Go
to me.
ahead, Judy.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sorry.
well, I have more basic question is, it seems like you're wanting to put some recommendations forward. So my question is what's the actual catalyst for this change? And some of the things that come to mind is, are we trying to increase our tax base by building? Is that what we're trying to do? Or is it because we're being driven by developers wanting to come in? Or are we trying to drive affordable housing? Or are residents wanting to live along the corridor? Because right now I see a number of for sale signs that have been up for 3 to 4 years. And I don't see activity. So who's driving this? Who's driving it? And if it's the Scio Township, then the
So I'll
only thing
answer
we would
that.
want, pardon me?
I'll answer that.
Okay,
One is, there is development going on in our township. And, for the last year and a half, we were talking about this concept of form-based zoning and how do we get more residential along Jackson Road as part of in our meetings. But we were not doing any planning on the planning commission. We were just dealing with these.
Requests, they come.
Yeah, we were just dealing with these developments
Reactionary.
coming in. So we were always reactionary. And so I know me and a few other people on planning, we said to Jan, are we gonna start planning or what? And so that's what got this group going.
but who's knocking on the door? Or is it you reaching out
No, it's developers are knocking on the door.
for Jackson Road?
Yeah, car wash, car dealerships,
Okay,
car
that's
this, car
different,
that.
that's
car
not
that.
housing.
Storage.
No,
Line of
we
storage.
have a housing problem like every other township
I-
too.
I
And so that's out
acknowledge
there as well. And those are secondary issues, housing and affordable housing and that's also out there. But I think the big impetus was that we have a finite amount of property, okay? And were we gonna take the helm and try to do some planning about it before all of it's built? So that's kind of how it all started.
And I think part of it is, to contain along Jackson Road where we do have water sewer. Because if not, development's gonna happen and it's gonna spill out to our rural. And if that happens, then we'll have on-site sewers and that type of thing. So if we can keep as much and keep the open spaces open, because that's part of our mission and vision. So that's a big part of it, but the more dense residential you have to have the services, well, retail, and we have to have services anyways, but retail and, you know,
Electric, gas.
And
Yeah,
you know,
the type-
it's the issue about the sewer. I wanted to say this last time when we were, because you brought that up again. It's my understanding in talking to our engineers, not every property has a sewer right, for lack of a better term. Some people bought into that, some property owners did, and some property owners didn't. I got this from engineering, OHM.
Yeah.
And so I think,
That's
but I agree with you, we need to know a little bit about it more, because I feel like,
I did speak with Matt Parks today.
okay.
I was waiting till everybody had their.
Go.
go through that,
You had your hand up.
I did speak with Matt Parks for quite a while today, and one of the things he said is Stacy unfortunately was out this week on vacation, but she had gone through the exercise and will likely soon at a board of trustees meeting, have a presentation around this. There's approximately 1,000 REUs remaining that have not been allocated either from a purchase but not yet used, or from a project that is in process. Specifically Woodview, specifically other, like the car wash that's under construction on Acre Road. This does not include REUs that may be needed by people like Crossroads or Race Groves, the movie theater site. One of the things he did share with me is apparently, generally they're more engineering focused, but there does seem to be a monthly meeting with the city of Ann Arbor to talk about things.
which,
So there is.
But it didn't discuss what properties have these established sewer rights and what
I
properties don't.
believe Stacy would be able to provide that when she.
Okay, good, I'm glad you're
and
looking into
I've
it.
asked for a map in the past, and they said they don't have one. So we have to know when somebody comes forward with a development, has to be a way to look it up and say, or to show.
This.
Is there?
Up the counter. The sewer district.
Yeah,
Well, for each parcel that.
But what's
not
allocated? Yeah,
per
what's
parcel.
allocated per parcel and,
Depends on the use.
well, right,
Matt also shared that ideally, once they complete some of the sewer pipe cleaning that has not been done in a fair amount of time, and some of the other projects over the next year that are planned, it would be wise to do a metering of this actual sewage flow to see where we are compared to where we think we are, and we might have more and or less REUs depending upon the improvements we see from that.
And part of it is how much sewage can we transmit across town?
Correct. The pumps actually have a lower limit of approximately 800 remaining REUs. That was the other thing.
Oh.
He
And Woodview is
mentioned.
not, if Woodview is not
There's
figured
some
up yet.
physical issues too.
Woodview is included in
So,
this.
Jay,
So,
Jay had said that
above
some
and beyond what-
parcels had purchased REUs already,
yes,
right?
Wait, what?
Some parcels have purchased REUs already. They may not have any.
I've heard that, I don't.
I've heard that too, and
That's
that's,
what Ryan just said. And then
I've also
At
heard that,
1,000.
I believe Stacy has a list of those parcels.
Yeah.
From third-party accounts from different people in OHM, I believe those do exist. It doesn't sound like there's over maybe 100 of them total.
well, I'm thinking that if there's a parcel that has, let's say there's 3 parcels
Mhm.
in a row. The middle parcel has purchased REUs, but the other 2 haven't. We have a PUD or multifamily, whatever that comes in that wants to build, maybe in that they would have to purchase
Mhm.
those 3 parcels, but then also the REUs that middle parcel.
Correct, and so when planning commission gets properties, there's always yes, you need an additional so many REUs, and yes, those REUs are available. And that also goes to the trustees, so that's part of, and Doug, my question is, if you have a by right development, is it still contingent on the availability of the REUs? Or the township would have to, so there's no way that we can give up the PUD piece because we need that control just based on the amount of sewer that we have.
Yeah, and my understanding of the the existing REU situation is the people who are in, you use the term purchase sewer capacity. It's actually, I believe it was part of an initial special assessment district when the sewer was first created. There are certain parcels that are part or were part of a special assessment district that paid a special assessment on their taxes for years and years. And so they are, they believe, or they do have some right to some capacity. And that capacity, I believe, was based on the current zoning at the time when they were part of that special assessment district. And I know, when we look at projects and have pre-application meetings, and I know Laura's on the call, so maybe, I don't know if things are different now, but we used to have the utilities director let us know how many REUs were available on a certain piece of property. And if that property needed more REUs, they had to go to the township board for a request for additional REUs. And so there is a list, at least there used to be a list. We used to use it all the time. And so somewhere out there is a list of all the properties that, have this theoretical number attached to them based on a special assessment district that they were part of, probably back in the late 80s or mid to late 80s when the sewer first went through Jackson Road. So that's my understanding.
Yeah, and I think Judy, to also respond to what brings this up is, and getting back to that planning, is that planning commission was seeing projects that we weren't really very excited about, like a bit more storage or storage expansion, or car washes, sort of things that, this is really Scio's main street. And if there's also then the idea of, if you provide and knowing that we can't do high density housing throughout the whole J-Rod, the idea of having some nodes where we could, through updating the overlay district, focus on, this is where the town really wants some higher density housing. And so that we can focus our infrastructure improvements, whether they be crosswalks, it's easier to do that at existing light, bus stops, those types of things. So rather than sprinkling things all along the corridor where you don't really get that idea of being able to.
Connectivity.
Yeah, the connectivity. And then we do have a grant that will be talking about doing more complete streets and look at what are the safest ways to do, include, the bike paths and walking paths and crosswalks and sort of do more of an integrated traffic study. And that way has to include MDOT, the road commission, and et cetera.
I
Yeah.
would say that that's a very, very important point you just brought up as far as looking at the parcels that already are near crosswalks and the bus stops, because like we've talked about it before, that there's a bus stop, but you have to walk a block to cross the street to get to the bus stop. And, DDA has done some bus stops, just because we noticed that a lot of people had to stand out in the rain. So, but the idea of, where the existing crosswalks are, if that's available, where maybe that's where we should kind of think about, if there's gonna be residential, that's where that should be.
Good point.
And by residential, are we talking multifamily?
Multifamily.
Yeah.
If this would be the area to do it
Yeah.
in, not let it spread out into the rural area. Like you were pointing out.
Commercial road.
And then Judy, just to answer your question from before, like to Kim's point, we're kind of having to look into the future of like, well, I think JRAD was established in 2006 ish.
It's revised.
Yeah, but going back and looking at this every so often is a good idea because of the nature and changes that have occurred in this area. Every 5 years, maybe 10 years, some time period to look at all this and say, what does this become? It may be that one day, and it very well could be, that some of the car dealerships start consolidating in one way, shape, or form, or go to more of a direct service delivery model as people start buying literally everything on their phone. And then we have a lot of these sites that are gonna have some really prime real estate to redevelop.
Yeah.
True.
And we've got this multifamily rental that's about to open with View Commons. And we're working through on our transportation team to make sure that we can cover that bus. And, I know I bring this up a couple times already, but there's somebody interested in building residential housing out in Parker and Jackson. So.
Yeah, and,
You know.
and part of that is how far out is too far out to have, multifamily, and how do you encourage it to, be closer to the retail and so forth, so you're not continuing to, push things out further. Okay, so have we exhausted that? Doug, want to bring us back?
She looked at me.
So I would say that my experience on the
That's good.
committee, we've been talking about these issues in between stuff, and even had a couple of dedicated meetings about what to do about Jacksonville before this group got put together. And I think the first, at least 2 meetings, it was like bringing everybody aboard to get, what is it? What are we here meeting about? And we're like going over that again, because now we got new people coming in, and that's fine. But I just think it's premature to be talking about any votes. I mean, I think it's a lot to take in. If I were sitting down today for the first time, I'd be asking the same questions that you guys are asking. So I just wanted to say that, because I think that any vote or recommendations that would be well thought out.
I don't think we get to vote.
We're not prepared.
You only get to vote. That are on the.
From the recommendations, but I also wanted to check in with, Kathy Knoll and Bob Walsh online and Kathleen Brandt. To see, it's kind of hard to do a hybrid meeting, and so I want to give this opportunity for you guys, if you just want to unmute and talk, that'd be great.
Okay, Jan, I can go ahead and say something.
Great, thanks.
Okay. First of all, I'm having problems with my Zoom connection and I can't see the group. And I'm afraid to touch anything because I do have a connection, but it's problematic. So anyway, I think it's going to take some time for the new people to have more information about these issues because the issues are complex and we've been struggling with them for months. In terms of the sewer capacity issues, I also have spoken with Matt and Brandon at length about these issues. And they had asked me to start attending the sewer committee meetings with Ann Arbor. And I plan to do that. I don't know if Matt mentioned that to you, Ryan.
Yep.
Okay. Matt and I have discussed some of the issues, but we've only skimmed the surface. When I was on the board previously from 2004 to 2008, our board did have to approve the REU allocations for every proposed development. When I came back on the board 8 years after that, and nobody was talking much about REU, I was shocked. And I said to Matt, what happened? Why are we approving REU allocations? And he went through a complicated explanation as to how the calculations had changed. And I think that explanation would be important for all of us to hear again. I don't even want to try to describe it because I didn't fully understand it. So I want to hear it from him, and we should all hear it.
You talking about the board level?
And planning commission too. I
The
think.
planning commission, the board, and this committee, yes,
Okay, good.
yes. So that's about it. I've enjoyed the discussion. Some of these issues the group has discussed previously, the JROD group, but that's okay. It's good to hear it from a fresh perspective. And I welcome the new members, the soon-to-be new members of the board.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Kathleen. I'll just give a perspective. I actually have been paying attention to the work of this committee since it started. I probably only missed one meeting, and I've been aware or watching the planning commission for the past 3 years. What I found new information today is that there is a meeting with Ann Arbor to talk about water capacity. I had no knowledge of that whatsoever. And then this whole issue, which gets asked repeatedly over and over and over again, how many RUs do we have? How many RUs do we have? So there's a lack of readable knowledge. And what I mean by that is I could say, oh, there's 1,200 RUs because I've heard it, but it's not, the data, the information is not readily accessible, like maybe or whatever. And then the sense of we have some properties that are allowed RUs, but we don't have a map that shows that, for example. So somehow we've lost this knowledge. Which I think is a good starting point would be, let's recapture that, let's document it. So if there are properties that have rights, we should know that and not have to dig through years of records to find that all over again. So, and then also make reports on what's going on between what's happening at these meetings with Ann Arbor. We all talk about at a certain point, there needs to be negotiations for additional ones, but I have no idea what's been going on to date. And I feel like I'm one of the more informed people about what's going on. So I think we need to get a handle on the data and how we can readily access the data.
I'd like to just add too, is I also get the sense that that number is a dynamic number.
Yes.
So for instance, when Woodview Commons comes online and it's fully occupied, it would behoove the township to say, to do a flow on it, because what's happened, the REUs are based on sort of an older plumbing code. And most developments don't use all of the REUs that they're allocated. So this is where it gets into the fuzzy dynamic nature of this. So when a large development like Woodview Commons that has X number of REUs, you put the flow on that after it's fully occupied, and most likely you'll find out that it doesn't use all the REUs that is allocated. So because of low flow toilets, low flow showers, all this kind of stuff. So that's why the OHM comes back and says, well, we should really do a flow analysis. And then on the other end, if you don't keep up your system, there are leaks and so forth. And so you end up using more water than you might project. So that's where the dynamic kind of comes in. And that's why there's always this, well, it's about whatever.
That's
So,
fairly easy to meter too, because it's only, there's the same one or two, probably two manholes. or
yeah,
something.
I don't know the detailing of it, but typically, I know the last study was done over, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or
Yes,
something like
Matt said
that.
it was like over 5 to 6 years ago. He recommends that Scio look at, once we've completed the jetting of the sewer lines, as well as some of these other projects we're working on over the next year. Probably this time next year, maybe into the following year, doing a metering study to realize where our actual flow is.
Yeah, so you get.
And what our
you kinda
actual
get that.
demand on the system is. It'll also inform probably additional potential capital needs at that point. So-
This is Kathleen. I would
Yes,
this-
I get.
Okay.
So, I'm talking about accessible data. I have a so if we have properties that have some rights to a certain number of REUs and we have allocated other parcels, this seems like some data that could be incorporated into the GIS system so that it's readily retrievable. And if we do an update every 5 years, then you could modify that.
Mhm.
You could put targeted REUs for a development that's in the process. So it becomes then a database of data.
Yes,
That would be.
I completely agree with you.
I like that.
What she said.
What she said.
Yeah, I thought OHM and
I'm-
utility, Brandon, they were working on something with the GIS system right now.
They were talking,
Layering, but something drafted, yeah.
Oh, different, okay.
Yes.
But that should definitely, yeah,
It's really.
don't ever forget that idea and implement it.
I know we talked about last time having Matt here, obviously he's had some personal things and some other things that he wasn't actually aware of this meeting until today, oops. There was probably about a 25 to 30 minute explanation behind a lot of this. How deep we really want to go into that is
Yeah.
the question.
But I think that's a very valid thing. It's, you need to get
This issue has come up all the time since I've been on the planning
And we'll
commission.
continue to.
And we get a figure, we don't really understand, I understand a little bit more about the dynamics of it. But the bottom line is, we need to know.
Sure.
With as much specificity.
Because we have a contract.
Yes, as we can get about where we're at. And we can't go 5 years and re-looking at it. We have to look at it every year to see where we're at. We have to know because I mean,
So I can provide that feedback to Matt and.
I'd be happy to go to a meeting and hear that explanation so that I understand.
Yes.
I'd like to, Kathy, Noel? Kathy,
Hi, Kathy.
Yeah, she's muted right now.
I have a question for you regarding the monthly meeting with Ann Arbor.
Oh, that'd be Kathy Noel,
Kathy.
yeah.
Yeah,
She said she had bad connection. She might.
Kathy, you there?
what was your question?
I didn't speak.
Can you
to-
hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So
I
this
have
month-
not attended a meeting yet with the Ann Arbor group.
Okay, and this Ann Arbor,
Supposedly Joyce had attended some of them a while ago and
Mhm.
she stopped attending them. And that was the reason a couple people asked me to, would I do it because I did it before when I was on the board. I was a member of the group that regularly met with the city of Ann Arbor. And I know Sue McCormick, I know some of the other people in the city dealing with this issue. So that was part of why they asked me.
okay, and what is the purpose of this group?
The
Purpose of
purpose
being
in the
Ann Arbor.
past was for OHM, Scio and Ann Arbor to keep current on issues impacting Scio and the city of Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor's had many required system modifications that Scio has had to pay for. And when these projects are looming, we at least would have notice, years notice. Some of these have to be planned out years in advance. So to be discussing those issues, to be discussing capacity issues, both water and sewer, to keep the communication lines open. There are certain events in our current contract that trigger reopening the contract. And we haven't had any of those events yet, but we might. And if the board decides they do want to reopen negotiations regarding capacity with the city of Ann Arbor, that's a separate issue. But it's just to have all of this being discussed by people who are familiar and hold open communication lines. That's how I see the purpose.
So this has been an ongoing meeting for ever?
This is
Or-
ongoing.
Not forever. I think that it has
1988.
kind of come and gone over the years. I think that it's lapsed for intervals and come back. But I think now more people are feeling it's important for us to be fully participating in the meetings.
The
I agree.
H2S was one of the issues Matt brought up that Ann Arbor's very concerned about, the hydrogen sulfide, where it smells like the
Yes.
sewage in people's houses.
Yes.
And Ann Arbor gets very rightfully upset if it smells like sewage next to your house. So.
Okay. Thank you for, just to be clear on what that, the meetings are about. Okay.
Okay. That's really helpful, do you think? Yeah, Bob.
And this discussion's all done. I had something separate.
Okay, are we good? I mean, I think
Sewer.
I think
sewer
we're good at
continues
sewer.
to be,
No, not about sewer. I got something else.
okay, but I'm gonna go to Bob and then we'll come back, because I also, okay, Bob Hyde, and then I wanna make sure Bob Walsh gets a chance to
Well,
say
maybe
something
Bob
too.
Walsh should go first.
Okay, Bob Walsh?
Hi, I'm not gonna touch sewer since I think it's been covered very well. I guess from a planning perspective, my look is what's the existing use on Jackson Road, then what's currently in the works, or what are we thinking is in the works? And then where do we want to go? For me, that then starts to lay out what, if any, additional, whether it's zoning, rules, do we need to put in place to get to that vision? And at this point, I just don't know enough, but that's where my head is at the moment.
That's a good summary.
I agree. I've got the zoning map up, along Jackson Road, and we've got all these different whether it's PUD or C4 or industrial, C2. So it's like, what do we need to do now to, if anything, to change our zoning ordinance or zoning map to like stop things we don't want anymore? Are there steps we should be taking now? Like, we know, like, do we not want to move westward generally with car dealerships? Do we not want to replace existing car dealerships when they move into Lithia with another car dealership? Like, oh, there's a brand we don't have yet. Gee, let's get that. So do we want to stop becoming the car dealership mecca of Washtenaw County somehow? And are there steps we need to take to our map, our plan, our master plan, or our ordinance now to prohibit that? And to allow more residential. So I guess, and that's
So
just.
that's a
rhetor-
use
that's
and
rhetor-
zoning kind of thing.
Yeah, that's, it kind of really segues off of Bob Walsh's comment. And then with respect to the sewer, maybe at some point we could put on our website, like, somebody must be the keeper of the toilets or know what's allocated to these parcels. Like, a map would be nice. Kathleen Brandt, great suggestion about that. So it'd be nice if we could have maybe a page on this dedicated to REUs and what we have on there. So we're not asking every damn meeting, hey, what's our REU? Same as it was last week, 1,200.
This comes up all the time.
I know, so maybe there's there's gotta be a dashboard about REUs and what's allocated. So I would suggest that. I don't know if that falls in OHM's lap or Carlisle Workman's lap or whomever's lap, but that's something that we have.
Oh,
Kathleen?
say it one more time.
If you incorporate RUs into the GIS system and you maintain it going forward, you can report on that anytime you would like. So that then becomes your database.
Yep.
It's, you don't have a database currently, it's my understanding.
Correct.
It's reportable.
What is
in
the system you're talking about, Kathleen?
The GIS system.
GIS.
Geographical information system.
Yeah, the county.
Layers upon a map that's maintained either at the county level or a local level.
Scio.
And which, the zoning map
Oh,
is a part of the GIS system.
Geographical what?
Information.
So Kim, it currently has all of the sewer lines. And the utility department is enhancing that so they can update for conditions. It gets down to the parcel level or the site specific. So you could add additional data to record either REUs for water or sewer capacities or by right REU assignments. And then you can report on that on demand.
We would have to probably
There's
contract
an
with
investment.
OHM to that part of the.
And you can layer up.
This AP on
Well,
there.
it's still an investment of dollars.
Yeah,
Of
it has to be
time.
allocated.
Well,
Whatever
you
they-
could put in allocated, actual, any number of layers that you wanted to call that, so you can keep track of it.
Real time.
But by the way, Scio Township, Scio currently has a GIS capability in-house.
Yes.
And that's exactly what I'm referring to, because Brandon is taking over that from OHM. He's developing the Scio system. This could be a component of the Scio system, not the system that OHM uses. It should be in-house.
Okay, Bob Hyde, you had something else you wanted to.
If we're done with
Yes.
with the sewers. We've talked here about how crosswalks are an issue and traffic lights are an issue and getting from one side of the street to the other safely is an issue. And the information that was provided for this meeting, going back to the beginning of this group, indicates that Jackson roadway classification is a principal arterial roadway. And that is I forget the national description of it. It's well, it's long distance travel through movements of vehicles. It's no longer long distance travel through. We have enough businesses along there that we're no longer trying to get from Ann Arbor to the freeway or from the freeway to Ann Arbor down the whole length of it. There's a lot of destinations intermediate. So this is more like a minor arterial roadway like Z Road is. Is this something that can be considered?
Well, the National Functional Classification is the classification that, you know, that map comes from. And that's a state classification. In which was confirmed to us, I think our first meeting, we had a representative from the Washtenaw County Road Commission involved. And she confirmed that, yes, Jackson Road is a principal arterial.
Sure, it's considered that.
Yeah, and it still does move traffic to the freeway interchanges and across the township. So changing that the NFC designation would probably be very difficult. However, and that NFC designation is not just a, you know, pretty designation for a map. It also has to do potentially with dollars from the state of Michigan. So that's a map that we put in there into the master plan because it's a map that has some basis through the state of Michigan. Now, that being said, there are communities, now typically these are communities that operate their own road system that will develop their own road classification system that doesn't necessarily exactly match the National Functional Classification system that's put out by the state of Michigan. But typically those are cities and villages that kind of operate their own road system. So we would, if you're asking, can that be changed? I suppose it could be, but I think it would be difficult to change that classification.
The reason I brought that up is not only because of how I preface the question, but Ann Arbor has just gone through convincing the national level to change the configuration of Jackson Road in Ann Arbor to 2-lane and with a center turn instead of 4 lanes. They're in the process of negotiating, taking over arterial roads, you know, Main Street, Stadium. So it can be done, and these are actually all connected to Jackson Boulevard in Scio. So it's not like there isn't precedence right now. It would make it easier to rework for pedestrians to safely cross it. That's where I'm going.
Although I think that saying that what we're really trying to get to is being able to make it a more complete street
Yes.
kind of thing. And what I think is helpful, and we'll probably get into that a little bit with the grant, is one, all jurisdictions have adopted the zero vision, which is eliminating traffic deaths. And also MDOT has adopted the complete streets planning process and so forth. So I think there are, even though I think transportation planning is changing in the way it's looking at the different factors and looking at all of the different movements, whether it's pedestrian, bicycle, trucks, and there's the grant requires us to use a certain tool that actually looks at what are the priorities of the jurisdiction that this road is in. And is it truck traffic? Is it pedestrian traffic? Is it bike? Is it a balance of those? And so that's going to be part of the
Excellent.
That-
Grant work.
planning work, yeah.
You throw out complete streets, what are you proposing? You have some very specific things I think you're proposing with just
Complete
streets.
streets, yeah, complete streets. What that is taking into account all of those different traffic. I mean, whether it's bikes or pedestrians or trucks or cars. And how do you allocate space within the right of way to all of those vehicles.
So we could have little posts in the road like Ann Arbor does and no,
We're not- I'm not-
they have no right to be on red.
Things, but.
You know, people come to Scio. No, people come to Scio because they don't want to be in Ann Arbor,
Come on.
you know?
But,
Listen, you know,
That's.
Yeah.
they
you know,
did
we
that.
would have laughed
You
at
didn't throw that out, you
15
just
years,
did.
15 years ago, we would have laughed at that, of Ann Arbor doing that, you know, and now here we are, so I mean.
15 years later, but I encourage you to look at what, this is not something out of the ordinary. This happened on Woodward, and that was bigger than Jackson Road. And that's certainly a major arterial roadway. And they put in bike lanes, they put in
They
crosswalks.
also put in parking in Ferndale. That was the smartest decision
Ferndale.
of that project, is they
Yeah,
also
they put it-
incorporated parking into
Yeah,
it.
On-street parking, but, so
Yeah,
I think
they
it's
like
not,
tear down too.
because right now, what we've got is, you know, kind of it's all, automobile oriented. And so I think part of that is how do you discuss what that balance is? And and how do you then get to, what are the strategies for making it more of a balance?
I would say also that, you know, some of this is part of the planning. We are not gonna be the quiet little country township. It's already changed in the last 10 years. There's more traffic, more people wanna live here, more. So we could either not pay attention to it, but my suggestion is that, we pay attention to it and figure out what we wanna do and how we wanna guide it.
And where we want.
Yeah, so we aren't, I mean.
That's what this group was for.
The other question I had was, in our first meeting back on April 17th, we talked about taller buildings.
Mhm.
And did we kind of just kick that to the curb or what? Because,
No, we
you
didn't.
know, I mean, we talk because when you start talking about, then you get into all kinds of fire issues and, you know,
REUs.
all that, all that.
All of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, we haven't talked about fire, right? That hasn't been a.
so, you know,
Uh-huh.
we have ready for underground parking and high density and 10-story buildings and one parking space per unit, kind of like what they're doing in Ann Arbor.
You know, I was at,
Those are all good questions.
I attend these Western area regional advisory group meetings where all the townships, the city of Chelsea, city of Dexter, and we share a lot of information, and we're trying to bring in all the others, Freedom, Manchester, all these other, so that we can be of one mind and be able to lobby the legislature and the county commission on various issues that Western Washtenaw County, we believe, is not paid much attention to. The focus tends to be on the eastern side of our county. But everybody's hurting for housing, and affordable housing or attainable housing. It's similar to us. Their workers in Chelsea can't afford to buy houses, or there aren't houses for sale. And that's similar to what we experience here in Scio Township. Some of our workers, Scio Township, live in Jackson County. So, but it came up about, I said, well, what if you, because there were some wild ideas about housing that I won't bore you with. And I said, well, what if once we develop all the land we have, then what do we do? And they said, we're gotta go up. And I mean, I just cringe at the thought of Scio turning into an Ann Arbor, not because, I mean, I lived in Ann Arbor for many years before I moved to Scio, so. But I moved to Scio because it's different than Ann Arbor with a little space. So I just say that to say that things are not gonna remain the same, whether or not we plan or we do plan. So, because,
So let's plan.
And we do have, I mean, if you look at the context of Jackson Road, and I think Kathleen, you brought this up too, is the property that is facing, you know, that faces 94, you know, might be treated very differently than the property that, you know, interfaces with the other parts of the township. And I think that
push
was,
back on that.
but
Because look along Oak Valley, all those townhouses that were built.
No, but what,
From the
what I'm saying
library
is it
to-
could take more of a density than, yeah, but.
And we can also
And
think
height.
about micro projects too. We don't have to have all residential or whatever, it don't have to be these mammoth 400 units or 200 units. I mean, Dexter's a good example of that. Along Baker, across from the post office, they're putting in these micro units.
But infill.
Still comes back to sewer.
It does, and well, Dexter's doing that, with the, I think it's a
It does.
4-story,
That's,
I didn't-
along Mill Creek.
Yes, that's true. No, that's, yep. Yeah, big issue.
But,
And we talked about affordable housing, and Will had told us about parcels that the township owns along Jackson Road. But it was interesting now, I think back on it, because
it's just the state bar line.
and, but as we looked at it, people thought, oh, it was too small, but it doesn't have to be huge. They don't, they can be small projects too, so.
Okay, Doug, did you, before, we're about, Jay wanted to say
It would
something.
be interesting too if the planning commission would look at drive-throughs.
If what?
Drive-throughs.
Where to allow drive-throughs.
Oh,
and
right,
where not.
That, you know, for instance, Scio Township owns the lot at the corner, it's less than an acre at the corner of Stabler and Jackson,
Mhm.
which really isn't big enough for parking. It's something that DDA took as part, had to do a total taking of it or get sued. And gave it to the township, and it would make sense for that. It's on the go home side, you know, that may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing, but without a drive-through and drive-throughs.
Where to allow drive-throughs is a question. that
Particularly
comes
after
up.
our experience with COVID and, you know,
What do you mean?
people with no
the go-
drive-throughs, it was carryout.
What do you mean the go home side?
Eastbound?
It has to do,
Jay doesn't live over.
there's a lot of people that work in Ann Arbor and Scio Township that live in Chelsea, Dexter and Jackson.
Westbound.
I mean, I've developed some property where we sold
So
the,
it's westbound.
it's, yeah. it's
They're
on-
going home westbound and they get something to go in a drive-through. Okay, I now understand what you mean.
You know, whether it's dry cleaning or food.
Okay,
or-
no, okay.
I hadn't heard that. phrase.
Doug, did you wanna, we have 2 minutes left.
Yeah. No, I think what I'm gonna do for the help for the group is, try to put together a list. It's gonna be similar to what I did before, maybe not recommendations, but I'll put together a list of the top, concerns, ideas that kind of have come out of the group again, so that maybe we can talk about those next time. Maybe Jan, you and I can talk about those before I send that list out to the group. And then I don't know, so that's one thing, and hopefully everyone agrees with that. The other is, I'm not sure what we do with the sewer capacity discussion. It's not that OHM, we missed inviting them. We've never invited them to these meetings up to this point because this has been a planning meeting. But if that's something that we might be able to kick off a meeting with next time, maybe we have OHM, hear it from the source, that might help. That may help. And so next meeting, maybe we do invite Matt to show up and give us a little 101. Because it seems like it's a little different every time I hear it.
Maybe to the planning commission or the board of trustees.
Yeah, it could be, I mean, I think that information going just to this committee, it's needed by a broader group than just this committee. So somehow we have to figure out how to, and the problem is they haven't, the question is, do they have any more information than they did the last time when they came up with the 1,200? The
Now it's
issue
the
is,
1,000.
if they do
Well,
have, yeah,
From
if
the
they do have more
sounds
information,
of the
then-
discussion, there is more information.
which would be great.
That's something.
Yeah.
So I would just like to say before we disband, I
Yeah.
appreciate the board of trustees and those that are new coming to the meeting today because we need your help. Obviously, this is more than, we can do a lot of planning, but the final say is with the board of trustees. And I appreciate the input. So thanks.
Have you, my last question is, have you ever done a charrette to find out if what the community, not appointees, what the community wants this village and township to look like and be?
We haven't done a.
It's been a while.
Right, the master plan, and unfortunately, when we were doing our master planning was during COVID. But if you look in the master plan, it kind of goes through a little bit of what, and that's the opportunity to do, you know, the visioning and so forth from a planning standpoint. So that's typically the opportunity to do that. And I know part of the RFP for the Jackson Road, you know, looking at the complete street stuff will also include some sort of community and you're.
Who did the SWOT?
We did,
That's the committee?
It did say.
yeah, we did that. We did that about a year ago.
Very similar group.
Yeah, we did that a year ago as a joint meeting of the Planning Commission, Township Board, and
See, it's
I
a lot
think-
of internal people talking to.
Yeah.
Same group of people.
Talking to one another and being driven by a consultant, which I'm not opposed to having a consultant driving, but they end up having overreach influence on what the community
I can say that the
wants.
consultant is not driving this. This is being driven from the planning commission. And when we talk about what drive means, these are the issues that have been coming to us as a planning commission. And part of our role as a planning commission is not just to approve projects, but to plan.
Oh,
So we
I
started
agree.
talking about
That's where
planning
threats
aspect.
come in.
Well, let me just finish. And so that's why this is here.
Okay.
This did not derive from the consultant. As a matter of fact, I
And-
recall me saying to Jan at a meeting, I'm tired of talking about it. Either we're gonna do it or we are gonna do it, but I'm not gonna be talking about it forever.
But we can talk a little bit too about
Yeah, the
that
methodology.
type of, yeah,
Yeah, because
engagement.
engagement, we're talking about what we want to save, what we want to protect, what we want to preserve.
We did that.
This is just the Jackson Road.
But it's instrumental
In what?
in what goes behind, like Jillian was saying, like if Jackson Road is not planned, pretty soon it creeps into
The other
property that we want.
We're
to
looking
keep
at this as
rural.
helping keep it here.
Yeah, that's,
And that's a bigger issue, and it's an important issue because I'm one that wants to protect the rural nature of our community. The problem with that, and I'll just leave it at this, is that when somebody sees a
Piece of property.
large piece of property
For sale,
and and it gets
Dollar
sold
sign.
off Jackson Road and it gets sold to a developer, they can build by right. They can build a lot of houses on it and create community wells and community wastewater treatment, community waste treatment facilities on them. And we've been dealing with that a little bit. It got slowed down and we have one of those such projects, which is at Baker and Marshall Road. They're gonna
Yeah,
get
that's a
the
whole
public
other-
water, but
there's
they're gonna
some
put a
cheap
community
shit on
waste
that, sorry.
treatment facility on that property. So we can't stop people from selling the moral of that is we can't stop people from selling their property. And I'm not even sure we
But
can,
that was agriculture, zone agriculture, and we had a choice of
yeah.
allowing that to be a
Yeah.
dense PUD or not. So that's where we have.
Like this.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure we have public comment left.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
we do.
Talking of public, so, I think we have Pam and Rob. Is there anything you'd like to contribute?
Pam Boyd, I've got Aiden, grandson on my lap. So I guess one of the things that I want to comment, someone had talked about how high I think Kim, it was you, the height of downtown Ann Arbor. Downtown Ann Arbor is no longer where I go. And I think it's important that we keep Scio hometown. And do we need to have 4-story buildings potentially to help do that? But I do think we should have a cap on it. We do want to keep Scio, I believe, hometown. Thank you.
Rob?
First of all, on behalf of Doug, he is the expert in the room. He is the professional planner with 30 years of experience in in Scio Township specifically. So he has the institutional memory of what's happened in Scio. And this is in response to Judy, that Doug is the expert that has helped guide the process and helps by responding to the Planning Commission for their requests for information and that sort of thing. So in no way have I seen Doug driving this process, but he is certainly a key figure in getting the process going forward, especially the J-Rod. That establishing that, number one, was brilliant, and number two, taking it to this next level that you guys have over the last couple of years has been critical towards getting us towards planning. Because as I completely agree with Commissioner Moore, we so need to get to the planning stage in Scio Township rather than the reactionary stage we've always been in. And I think I have to take my temperature because, oddly enough, I once again agree with Jay Holland. I disagree with him 90% of the time.
Whoa.
But I completely agree that until we have a new contract with Ann Arbor and or a new sewer system, a new upgraded sewer system that can handle more capacity, we need to protect the J-Rod for commercial applications, because certainly the north side of Jackson Road, between Jackson Road and the highway, is not really suitable for residential. I completely disagree that Goodrich wants to build a 6-story apartment complex right next to the highway. I think that's a ridiculous idea. But until those 1,200 REUs are used up, I think you need to be very frugal with them and reserve them for more commercial rather than residential applications. And once again, this group is talking about the big ideas of Scio, and you're getting towards planning. And I think you need to meet, seems to me, this isn't a 1 more meeting or a 2 more meeting resolution of this. I think you've got some more work to do because the ideas you're talking about are so big. So keep the process rolling. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that is it. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned at 6.
Jessica, you too?
No.
Take care.
Good night.
Judy.
Call me when you're done.